In today's video, we're going to put the finishing touches on our cutscene system by adding the ability for us to enter or trigger a cutscene by entering an area. We're going to add these nice black bars that you see here, the music transition, fix a little bug, and just have some fun with it. Hi, my name is Michael. Welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. Follow along and learn how to create your own ARPG in Godot 4 using GD script. All right, let's see. Ditched the Michael Games hat for an old favorite, my Gremlins hat. I don't know if you can see that. I'm recording on Halloween, so I guess I'm all decked out in orange. It was somewhat intentional, but I don't have a costume or anything. But here we are. So when you're watching this, Halloween's already passed, so I hope you had a good Halloween. But what we're going to be doing today is we're going to add a few extra things to our cutscenes. There's been a couple comments and a couple items that people have wanted and wished for. Some of those are things like the ability to trigger a cutscene without having to start a dialogue, which makes perfect sense, right? Because you don't want to have to go talk to an NPC before you can have any cutscene in your game. Sometimes you want one as soon as you enter a room, or maybe you want one when you reach a certain point. And so there's different ways that we can trigger this cutscene without dialogue. We'll implement one today, which will be an area-based trigger. So once the player enters the area, it'll start our cutscene. And then from that, you'll be able to use that, I think, to integrate it with other things, because really all you need is a signal from one thing and then the ability to pick it up or trigger the dialogue interaction, from without the player and the interaction script itself. So we'll do that. And then we're also going to just look at some refinement. We can add music transitions to our cutscenes, as well as one fun suggestion, which was to add black bars at the top and bottom. So we'll try and tackle all of those in this video today. Okay, so let's start with actually one that's quite simple, and that's going to be our cutscene music transition. And so we're going to make a new cutscene action type that will be dealing specifically with music, and it's going to tie into the audio manager system that we built what felt like forever ago. I mean, it probably was about a year ago at this point, I don't know. So it'll tie into that. It'll work pretty easily because we've built that. And if you're new to my series and didn't build that, then you can always go back and find that video if you need to. But let's start by making that new script, I guess. So I'm going to just open one of these, this action player cutscene script here, just so I can find the folder. I'm going to right click that. There it is, show in file system. At the risk of having to remove a lot, I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate this cutscene action player, and we'll call it cutscene action music. And then we can open this script. And I don't want to deal with an icon right now, but you can do whatever you want. I'm going to go ahead and just maybe remove this icon for now, and then you could replace it with one later. Get one with a music note on it or something along those lines. And of course, we need to change the class name. We cannot use this same one. So it's a music cutscene action. Okay, I'm going to do it. We're just going to go through and just delete a bunch of stuff. We don't need pretty much anything in here. In fact, even if we do, we can just add it again quite simply. We aren't going to need anything really in our ready function for this one. We could just remove it altogether, I suppose. But I'm going to just leave it empty in case we come back and want it. We will, of course, need the play. That's kind of like the bare minimum function that all of our cutscene actions require. And let's see. I'm going to go ahead and just remove everything else. Okay. That could have been easier than, than that if I just made a new script maybe. But here we go. What does this need to do? Really, all it needs to have is storing reference to an audio file or a music WAV file, MP3, whatever it is that we want to play, and then the code to make it play that when it's triggered in order here. So we'll go ahead and just export a variable for that sound file. So export var, I guess I'll call this track, right? Because it's like a music track. And this is of type audio stream. And I'm going to export one other variable, just to make this a little bit more robust. So in addition to playing music, I think we want to have the option for this to stay the track that plays once the cutscene is done, or maybe an option to reset it back to whatever was playing before this happened, right? So I'm going to say reset after cutscene. So this is a Boolean, and we'll set equal to false by default, or maybe we'll set it to true, actually. Because maybe you only have one music transition when you start a cutscene, and then you typically would want to go back to whatever music was playing in that scene or that level. And then because we want to be able to reset our audio track, let's go ahead and make a variable where we can store that original soundtrack in case we need it. So we'll just say var original track. So original track is also an audio stream, and voila, I think we're pretty much set up. Let's go ahead and go down to our play function, because this is going to be pretty straightforward to implement. So the basic thing that we need to do is grab our audio manager, right? And if you recall this script, we'll just look at it real quick. We've got a few functions in here. We've got play music, and then these play and fade in and fade out and stop are not functions that we need to call externally, but this play music is the one that we'll use. And you can see we just pass in an audio stream, and then this handles transition from the current track to the one that we pass in. Okay. So coming back here, we'll say audio manager dot, I already forgot what it was, play music, and just pass in our track, just like that. Now this is enough for it to work for the most part. Because of the way our cutscene system is built, this action would be completed as soon as it triggers the music transition. So we do want to emit that finished signal. So we'll say finished. Finished. I'm from Norway's. Emit. We'll emit that finished signal, meaning, okay, this action is complete. Go on to the next one in the list, right? So if we were to add this right here, it'll just do that. Now, this doesn't have any way to handle the resetting to the original track, but let's go ahead and test this and see it working before we do that real quick. So I'm going to come over here to 2D. In my dialogue cutscene here, I'm going to go ahead and add music. I'm going to type music, cutscene, action, music, and it's still got that icon associated with it. That'll clear when we restart. Okay, I'm going to drag that to the top of my list, and I'm going to assign a music track. So I'll just come up here and say quick load, and I'm going to type music. I think I've got some, example music. We'll pick number 3. And then I typically have had the music muted when I've been recording these videos. So I don't know, that's just so we don't have music going all the time. I'm going to go ahead and unmute the music for this. And with that, I believe we're ready to test this. So we've got this cutscene music here. When we run this, we should hear some audio playing that's associated with a default level here. And here we can see we've got example music 1, and we assigned example music 3 here. So we should hear a transition. So I'm going to go ahead and just run this scene and we'll test it out. You can see our players run around like crazy and the music changed. Okay, and there we go. That's our cutscene. And now, obviously, our music has stayed changed. And again, this is something that you may want sometimes and not at other times. So let's go ahead and address that by hopping back in to our music script. And what we'll do is we'll check this variable here when we start our play function. So we'll say if reset after cutscene, then we need to store that. And not only do we need to store the original audio, but we need to have a mechanism to know when we're done and play it back, right? So let's see, we'll say original track equals, and then grab our audio manager. And we don't actually have a good way to get the currently playing stream from the audio manager. So let's go ahead and go create a function that will give it to us. So I'm going to just come down here to the bottom of this audio manager script, and I'm going to make a new function, and we'll call it get current stream or get current track. And I guess it doesn't return void, right? This is going to return an audio stream because that's what we're wanting. Like, hey, what's the audio stream? What are we listening to right now, buddy? Okay, and so this is a one-line function. It's really simple. We've already got things set up. We have two different, we need a little bit more refresher maybe for this to make sense. We've got music players, it's an array, and we can have one or the other playing. We generally only use 2, right? But how we use that is so that we can transition and fade from one to another and have a little bit of overlap. We keep track of which music player is the active one with this current music player integer. Okay, so it's either going to be 0 or 1, right? Whichever one happens to be playing. And then every time we change the music, this gets assigned to the other one, and we add, we put that music track there, and then we fade them. So what we just need to do down here is return, and then we'll just say music players, and then we need to grab the music player at the current music player index. So that's current music player index, or just current music player. And we're not returning the music player itself, but we're returning its assigned stream, just like that. Okay, so now we've got a get current track function. I'm going to copy this, come over here, and we'll call that here. So if reset after cutscene, original track equals this. So we're going to get a reference to that. And then we need the second part that I mentioned, a way to kind of trigger this audio change. And fortunately, we've built our dialogue system in such a way that we have a really easy way we can hook into this. So what we're going to do is just look at our dialogue system. It has a finished signal, so we'll connect to that and we'll do what we need to. So we'll say dialogue system.finished.connect, and then we'll we're going to need to create a new function, right, that we can call. So we'll just say on dialog finished or on cutscene finished or something like that. And let's make that function. Okay, there we go. Easy little function here. That's only going to happen once when the dialogue is complete. And all we really need to do is basically this same line of code right here, except we're going to play the original track. Okay. So now if we run our cutscene test again, we should hear the music go back once we complete the cutscene. Nice. And there we go. There we have it. Now we've got a way to change music with our cutscenes. So first step complete. Okay, the next part I'd like to do is to add those horizontal black bars that are going to make this cutscene feel more cinematic. And this is probably not super ideal for this pixel art style of game, though it does actually kind of provide the effect that we're going for. So, you know, you can take this or leave it, but this will at least give you an idea of how you could do other visual effects that tie into your dialogue system. I'm going to actually open that dialogue system global scene that we've got. And let's see, where does that live? It's under GUI dialogue system right here. Dialogue system scene. Okay. So here we go. This is the scene that we're going to use because this is the scene, this dialogue system is the scene that has this script that's called globally. It's our dialogue system script. It's the one that runs all of our dialogue and our cutscene actions, right? It's the orchestrator of the whole thing. So what I'm going to do is we're going to add in here a new control, okay, as a child of this, not as a child of the dialogue UI, but of the system. So it's going to be a separate UI control. And this way we can layer it. To start, I'm going to keep it right where it added it at the bottom. This means it'll be on top of the dialogue UI. We're going to want to change that. Otherwise, it'll cover up the text and things like that. But for the moment, we'll just keep it where it is. And oops, I want to select this little anchor preset, make it full rectangle so that it fills my view. And then all we need to do with this is add a couple nodes. We're going to add 2 black rectangle nodes, and then we'll add an animation player that we can use to animate them, and then we'll be able to control it. So let's go ahead and add those nodes. We'll add first a color rect. I'm going to make it black. We'll make this rectangle fill the width, and then of course that shrunk it. Let's give it a height. I'm thinking about 36 pixels tall. Let's see, so let's go here to layout, transform. Hey, look at that, it was close, 36. And then we'll just duplicate this color rectangle. And man, can I get it to the bottom without squishing it? Boink, that ruined it. Boink. Yeah, we're gonna have to just do some of this manually real quick. There might be a better way to do that. If I'm stupid and I'm missing like a really obvious option, please comment in the comments section below. And then we can all learn from it. See, transform, it's totally way too tall. I'm just going to drag it manually and watch that little pixel adjust until I get it right. So there we go. So these are the rectangles that will appear when we're in our cutscene. But as you can see, this is kind of covering up our NPC portrait and all that, and that looks kind of gross. So we'll go ahead and just move this to the top layer, and that'll plop it right behind. And let's add that animation player I mentioned, because we'll need that to animate them in nicely. I mean, you could just turn them on and off, make them visible, make them not visible, show and hide them, right? But I think a little animation will make them feel extra nice. So let's go ahead and in our animation player, let's create, we're going to have 3. We'll have a default animation. We'll have like a start and an end. Okay, so then the first animation we can create is the default. And I'm going to set this one to be the auto played animation. And what we want to do is, or at least what I'm going to do is I'm going to keyframe the position of these. And I'm going to just drag it out so it's off the screen, and this should be at least -36, and I'm okay with -37. Likewise with this one, just drag it off, okay? And then I'll come in here, and now with this animation track, I guess I could just go back to this and click it, and we're going to keyframe this position, and we'll do the same with our other color rectangle. I'm blind. Keyframe that position, voila. Now we'll duplicate this animation and we'll call it start. And the reason I wanted to do that first is because start goes from here to, and then I think 1 second is a pretty good time interval actually. I'm just going to set my snapping on and set my interval to 0.1. Okay, then at the end or somewhere thereabouts, we'll grab our rectangles and we'll put them back into place. And you can do this by eyeball because it will snap to pixels unless you've got all your snapping turned off. I don't know. Do I even need to turn it on and off? Yeah, use pixel snap. So you'll know you'll at least snap to a pixel, which is nice for a pixel art game. There we go. That's where we want them to end. And then I just got to key these positions both. Did I key that? I guess I did. Did I not key my other one? I didn't. Let's go ahead and add the key to this position. Okay, there we go. So now we've got a little animation that looks like this. Okay. And we'll go ahead and duplicate this animation again and call it end. And what we can do here is we can just swap these keyframes really. So we'll just put these at the end, put these at the beginning. And now we've got a transition out. Okay. I'm going to do one other thing. Now that I've completed this, I'm going to go to my default animation. And what we want to do, we could do this through code. I'm going to do it the lazy way. I tend to avoid, doing this the lazy way and animating some of these parameters. But because we have only 3 animations, I don't plan to add. I'm going to go ahead and animate the visibility of our control. So the default state of the visibility should be off. I'll key that. And then when we have our start, we need this to be on. We'll key that. Okay. And then for our end, it should also be on. But at the last frame, and you'll notice I kind of semi-intentionally did this. I didn't put the position transition on the last frame, but I'm going to come here on the last frame and turn the visibility off and key that. Okay, so that way they'll turn back off after the animation ends. Okay, there we go. Animations all set up. Now we just need to hook this into our code into some somewhat obvious places so that it all works. Well, let's open our script here and we'll go to our show dialog. I'm going to close the animation player. It's taking up way too much space. Now in here is where we want to play and stop this. Now there's an option here. We could just always show the black bar whenever you talk to somebody, or we could show it conditionally if we have cutscenes. And I think the simplest way to do the cutscene condition is just to have a check. If there are any cutscene node types within this dialog, then we know it's a cutscene, otherwise it's not. Now, similarly, you could do something else where you add a variable to maybe the first dialog item or something where you say, yeah, this one is used black bars or not, but I'm not going to add a new variable for that. I'm just going to assume that all items that have a cutscene should get the black bars, okay? Now I'm going to add an extra check in here because we already do kind of a check to see if the first item is a cutscene. And actually this can potentially be buggy. So I'm going to just add an additional if here, and I'm just going to say if we have items in case we don't have any items, and that's plural. Okay. And then we could take this, plop it over. And then what we need to do in here is just add kind of an additional little check or loop. And what we're going to do is we know we've got items. Here we're just checking if the first one is a cutscene, but really in order to know if this has any cutscenes, we need to iterate through all of the items. So what we'll do is we'll say for I in items, I guess. If you can type items, I know it's hard to spell, Mike. And then we'll just do this one by one. If I is dialog cutscene, then we know we've got a dialog cutscene, right? And in this case, here's what we're going to do. We're going to just grab, in fact, let's give this a name. It's just called control. Let's call it cutscene UI. I'm going to just grab this and drag it in. We'll say cutscene UI. I don't want that though. I want the animation player. Okay, cutscene UI / animation player, and then we'll say .play. And then we'll just play this start animation. Boom. Okay. And then I guess I've got a, oh, I've left out an underscore on my item, so we got to add that. And then I think that's enough to make that part work. Then let's go down, and in fact, I'll just grab this piece of code. We'll come down to our hide dialog. I'm going to come down just, I don't really know if it matters where. I'll just put it at the end, I suppose. We'll just play the end animation. And actually, one thing to make this, let's go ahead and test this. And in order to make this test a little bit quicker, I'm just going to remove a couple of these things. We don't really need all this goofy stuff. Eventually, we'll have to put together a nice looking cutscene because I keep messing with it. Okay, let's go ahead and test our cutscene, see if it even works. Those black bars, that look gross. We got to fix that. But here we go. They turn on. And then they go away. Now, I think one thing that's happening is we're playing that end animation or some animation when we don't necessarily want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and make an adjustment. And I'm not going to, in the end animation, I'm not going to set this visible to begin with. Okay. Because really, if it's visible, it'll be showing and then it'll become invisible. But then even if we play that at the end, you notice I didn't put a condition in our script. So it's just going to play this no matter what. But it's just going to take the initial state of the visible at the point that it is here and just play that. And so we should never really see it. Now, I don't know why this default didn't turn off the visibility of the cutscene UI when we ran our project. So let me run this one more time. Does that happen? Okay, there, it's gone now. And voila, now we've got some nice little black bars that can make our cutscene feel a little bit more cinematic. So I just noticed as I was doing this that there's a little bit of a bug in here. When we move an NPC, his behavior doesn't reset properly. So I'm going to show this here, like our NPC, when we move an NPC during a dialogue cutscene, when it ends, oftentimes they'll be like stuck in some weird state. They don't know what to do. So we're going to work on correcting that real quick. So I've got a pretty advanced little cutscene set up here. I'm going to go ahead and just open this cutscene action move script. And we're just going to look at this real quick. I'm already down here on the onTween finished function. So, you know, this is what happens after the movement is completed. It's the callback function on our tween. And this is what ends or finishes this, you know, cutscene action. And we're doing an all right job here. We're setting our process mode back to inherit. We are grabbing our NPC. We're telling it to do behavior. And we're telling it to do this state. And we're resetting its speed scale if we need to. And then we're setting its process mode back to inherit. And we're just missing maybe two things. So I'm going to go ahead and just add 2 extra lines of code in here, maybe right here. There's actually a signal on our NPC that we emit when we're ready to do behavior. And so I'm going to go ahead and just add this here. And it's, well, let's see, npc.do_behavior and then enabled. So we're going to go ahead and emit that. And then just to be safe, I also want to update the animation because we've changed some things about its state. So we should say npc.update animation. And then hopefully if I rerun this scene and get to the end, my NPC will be working a little bit better. I am a buff and amazing dude. Thank you, Oren. That's kind. There we go. He's back to his wander state. Okay, so we've kind of removed that little bit of an issue there. All right, so now that we've set up our music playing and handled the little cutscene bars, the last thing that I want to do is the area trigger so that we can trigger our cutscenes without talking to the NPC. We'll go ahead and create a reusable scene for this. So you could theoretically take this concept and extend it to do other things. Now, this area trigger that we're going to build isn't much different than other triggers we've built for things like interacting with, you know, a treasure chest or an NPC. Okay, it's just going to be a slightly different flavor of that same kind of concept. But this node that we'll build will be generic enough that it could be reusable for lots of things if you want to. So I'm going to come down here to, yeah, I guess general nodes is a good place to do it. I'm going to make a new folder for this. So create new folder. We'll call it area trigger. And then we'll create a node within this folder, or a scene, I should say. Area trigger. And I'm just going to leave it as a 2D scene. But we do actually want it to be an area 2D, so we'll change this root node, change the type to that. You could have selected that from that creation dialog, but not a big deal. Okay, so it's called area trigger. It's an area 2D. Really what we need to do is just kind of configure this. So it's monitoring and monitorable. I'm not going to change these too much right now. You could. Really, the only thing I'm going to worry about is that it's not on a layer and that its layer mask is looking for my player. And you know, in this series, we've always built it so that the player is the only thing on layer 1. So that just makes it easy. Fewer checks, cleaner code. But there we go. So we've got this area trigger. We want a script attached to it, but we don't need to do anything else with this scene other than this basic setup. So let's go ahead and attach a script. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a class name like I always do, almost always do. Area trigger. Extends area 2D. Okay. So what does this script need to do? It's pretty simple. Obviously, we just want to detect when the player enters, and when we do, we will trigger a dialogue interaction, and we'll also emit a player entered signal so that this could be used more generically. You'll see how that would work. But we're only going to be using this specifically for our dialogue today to trigger that cutscene, but you'll get the idea. So let's go ahead and make a signal for this so that it's generally useful, and we'll call this player entered. Okay, for when the player entered. You could extend this to have masks on different layers and make it emit signals when enemies enter if you wanted to. You would just have to differentiate them, identify what the parent class is of the node, or put them in groups or something like that. But that's our simple signal. We'll make a variable for a dialogue. So this will be a dialogue interaction. And how we're going to do this is, you'll notice it's not an export variable. We're going to just do it based off of the parent-child relationship in the scene tree. So if we have a dialogue interaction as a child of this area trigger, then we'll know that that's the dialogue interaction we want to trigger. And then I'm going to put a variable in here called triggered, just a Boolean, so that we can kind of remember like, okay, this has already been triggered. And then this way we can make it so that you can only enter the area once, trigger the cutscene once, and then once this is set to true, that'll go away. Now you will need to maybe integrate our persistent data object into this if you want to be able to get this triggered value saved in your data. I'm not going to go through that exercise right now. I think that should make a lot of sense though if you look back at how we used that kind of a system with our treasure chests and other things. It's basically the same concept there, okay? So with that, I'm going to make a ready function. And what we're going to do in our onReady function is first we're going to connect to the body entered signal that this area 2D already has built in. So we'll say body entered.connect. Okay, and then we obviously need a function for this, so we'll call it onBodyEntered. And let's create that function down here. We'll just make an empty function for now. And there we go. The other thing that we're going to do, so this will already make it generally useful. Actually, let's go ahead and do this. Let's just come down here. The basic functionality of this is just that we would want to emit that player entered signal, right? Player entered.emit. And there we go. That's all we need. Now you could use this for other things and then just connect the signals either through code or through the inspector. Okay. But now we need to make this work specifically with our dialogue system because that's the real goal of this right now. So what I'm going to do is, I mentioned that we're going to check for children to see if we have a dialogue interaction node. And if we do, then we're going to automatically connect to it. So we'll say for C and get children. There we go. And then we'll do kind of the typical pattern that I tend to do with this. And I'm just going to check each child. And if we find a child that is a dialogue interaction class, right, then we know we've got one in here, we can use it. So I'm going to go ahead and just assign that to our dialogue variable. So dialogue equals C. And then at this point, we don't need to continue any further. So I'm going to use the break command. Return and break are different in the sense that return ends the whole function. Break will just break this for loop sequence. So then if you needed to add code outside here, the break would just say, okay, stop iterating over children, but go ahead and keep doing the rest of the function. Whereas return, right, would not run this code down here. I think a lot of you probably understand that by now, but not a concept I've addressed specifically, I don't think, in the series. Okay, so this is going to grab a dialogue interaction. And then, of course, our onBodyEntered needs to do a little bit more work to trigger this dialogue interaction because right now we're just emitting the signal, but because we're building in this intrinsic relationship, I don't want to have to worry about connecting to a signal with our dialogue interaction. In that case, we'll just know how to handle it, I suppose. So I'm going to do a couple things. First of all, let's add the check. We've got this triggered variable, so we'll just add this in here. We'll start integrating this. So if triggered equals true, that means we don't want to do this. The player's already entered. We've already triggered the cutscene, so we'll just return. Okay, that's how we can prevent that. Then we'll come down here. I guess this emitting this signal on the next line is fine. But then next we want to check if we have a dialogue. Okay. If dialogue just means is this a null value or not? And if it's not null, that means we have an object stored there, right? So if we've got one, then let's go ahead and let's trigger the dialogue. And we'll also set our triggered value to true. So we'll say triggered equals true. And then we're going to grab our dialogue. And the dialog actually has a function. If we look at our dialog interaction, we've got a couple methods in here. And let's see, we've got this player interact. And this happens like when we interact with an NPC, then it kind of hooks up, right? And then this gets fired off. This is what triggers the dialog to begin. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to call this player interact method manually. So let's go back to our area trigger and come down here. Dialog.playerInteract. And that's just going to start it. So here's what we're going to do. That should be all the code we need to make this work. Pretty straightforward, right? This is really simple. If we've got a dialog, it's going to do a little bit of extra logic. Otherwise, it's just going to simply emit this player entered signal, and then you can use that to hook up any kind of node that you want to. I'm going to go ahead and go over to my cutscene here, though, and let's add, I'm going to do a Shift-Control-A, and I'm going to add an area trigger. And I'm going to move this node up to the top for right now. Now, what I'm going to do is, right now we've got this dialogue interaction all as a child of the NPC here. And so I'm just going to take this whole interaction and drag it to the area trigger. We also, of course, need a collision shape. That's why we've got this configuration warning. So let's add that. And I'm just going to set it as a simple rectangle shape. And then I'm going to just drag that rectangle. And let's say anytime we enter the right half of this screen, we want to start the cutscene, right? And then what we could do is maybe let's move the player spawn over here. And there we go. So we've set up our area trigger with a collision shape and a dialogue interaction. Let's go ahead and just run this and see if it works. I mean, ideally, that should be all we need to do, unless I've overlooked something, which happens from time to time. Like, yeah, that didn't work. It looks like we got a debugger error. Let's go ahead and check that out. Boop, 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 boop. Error calling signal body entered. Oh, did we write something funny in our script here? Oh, I know what we did. And if I finish reading this error, method expected 0 arguments but called with 1. So this method is expecting 0. We don't have anything in here, but the body, this is just a stupid oversight. Body entered, right? It essentially gives us this body, this node 2D. So I'm going to copy that and go back to the script. We're just going to simply plug that in here. But since we're not referencing the body, I'll give it an underscore. Okay. That's all we really need to do. That's just something that I just kind of forgot. Okay, let's go ahead and test one more time. Now, hopefully, somewhere over here is an invisible line. Hey, look at that. Triggered the cutscene just by walking into the area. We've got our nice dialogue bars here at the top and bottom, and the music change, and everything seems to be working pretty good. And because we've got that triggered variable, I can't re-enter the area and trigger the cutscene again, okay? Maybe you want to make it so that you can, I don't know, that's up to you. There's a couple other things you could do with this, right? You could take this area trigger and this whole dialogue interaction, and you could put it underneath the quest node so that you can, you know, have it trigger quest progression or be dependent upon quest progression. There's all sorts of things that you could do with it, and I'm going to leave that up to you to explore. But maybe I'll put together a quick little cutscene that kind of demonstrates using all of the tools we've built, and I'll put that in the little bit of outro that we've got going on here. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. This is going to be one of the last main videos I do in this series. I'll probably be revisiting it from time to time. But as I move forward in this channel and I focus on the Metroidvania Forge, I'm also going to be branching out, and some of the things that I'm going to be doing are going to be more generic, smaller mini-series. And I know I've talked about this in the past. It's just a really hard idea to execute. And I'm, you know, just now developing the skills where I feel like I can make good on that idea. So I'll be releasing things that, while they may not be a part of the action RPG series, they will be totally usable for this series, and they'll be modular so you could drop them in, integrate them into your game, and get the feature, you know, without having to follow this whole series and vice versa. So thank you guys for following along and being a part of my channel. As always, please subscribe, especially if you want to see what's coming next from me. Drop a comment in the comment section below. If you think I've done something goofy or you have some cool idea, go ahead and share it. Share it with the community. And as always, we'll see you next time.